In this video, I'll show you how to make an original list layout, but first of all, you need to know how customizing CSS works. Every part of your list page has selector codes assigned to it that control its looks and style. For example, the blue bar here is controlled by this selector code down here. Any codes added after that selector code within brackets change and define the style of that bar. So as you can see, there's a background color here defining its blue color. And if I change the background color to red, it makes the bar red. I can also change the width and add a new code like left to move it this many pixels to the left. Every part of the list has its own selector code and property codes changing it afterwards in brackets. To make changes to your layout, you copy these selector codes with the changed property codes and paste them to your CSS Edit Box, then save, and that applies changes to your list layout. That's how original list layouts are made. You probably noticed that custom CSS layouts made by designers are made of a ton of these codes, and they follow the same principle. It's a lot of selector codes with more codes after them in the brackets. Now, first of all, before coding a layout, you can plan what kind of layout you want to make, and it can be as simple as making a blueprint on paper or a blueprint in any graphic design program, including Paint or GIMP or Photoshop. When you're planning the layout, think of how you'd like to change the images, colors, table sizes, table and link positions, and the fonts. These are typical things that get changed with the layout, and in the next step, I'll show you how to change all those things. If you're having trouble deciding how exactly you like to style these, you can get some ideas by looking at other list layouts or different websites, or base your layout on an anime or a video game. For example, you can see this layout rearranged the links and uses images from an anime and has unique fonts. Okay, so hopefully you have some kind of plan for your layout. Now open up the Firefox browser, which is linked under this video, and log into your account. Go to Account Settings and go to the List tab to see if you need to set up any columns that will show up on your list. And then go to List Style Design tab here and click on the theme where you have shaded anime. If you don't see these, you should set your layout to modern. You should set the background and cover image to off as well, and also delete everything that's in the box that shows up when you click the Add Custom CSS arrow. Save those changes with the blue button that says Save on it if you need to. And then open up your MyAnimeList page. Make sure you keep open the page with your custom CSS Edit Box, since we'll be using it later as we make the layout. Now we'll do some coding and customize a list with Firefox Inspect Element tool. Right-click the page in Firefox and choose Inspect Element. Select the tool on the upper left circled here. Now whatever part we shade and then click on will show up in the tool at the bottom middle, and you can customize its codes from there. It also gives you the selector code and shows you any property codes currently customizing what you highlighted and clicked on. For example, I'll show you how to use this with something many people are familiar with, the main background. I use the tool and highlight the main background and click it, and the selector body shows up in the tool. Body is a selector code for the main background. The codes under body control the background. I can click the space to the right of the codes and add background color, and then click Tab and add red to change the background color to red. So here's my blueprint for the layout we're going to make. As you can see, we have this green futuristic background, so I want to apply it now to body. Here's how you change the background image with the CSS codes. We can add the property code background image under body, tab over, and then add URL and parentheses after. In the parentheses, we need to put a direct link to the background. I get that direct link from uploading the futuristic background image to Imgur. They give me a basic share link which I need to add .jpeg or .png to the end of. I'll add some other codes under body to better fit the background, and you can use these too. We'll also add images to another spot later. But with this part of the code complete, I want to copy and paste the body selector and the property codes to my CSS Edit Box from earlier. So pause the video and open up your CSS Edit Box and customize your list's body selector with the Inspect Element tool. Just do as I did and choose your own color or background image. You can also use HTML colors for your background color, which you may need a generator for, but I'll link you to that underneath the video in the description. You want to get familiar with the Inspect Element tool now, and familiar with copying and pasting codes to your CSS Edit Box, since we'll be using it a lot later. Now let's move and reposition something. I can use the tool again and highlight the category links table, then click on it, and the codes come up on the bottom, and now I can add positioning codes. The first positioning code I'll show you is position fixed. This fixes the category link table in place on screen at all times. Now I set top to 0 pixels, which moves the table 0 pixels from the top of the screen where it'll stay fixed. Now I add right 0 pixels, which moves 0 pixels away from the right edge of the screen. Instead of top and right, I could also use left and bottom codes if I wanted to fix it to those edges instead, and we will see those codes later. When done, as always, I copy and paste the codes to our CSS Edit Box, including the selector and the brackets. Now I'll move the list table. When I highlight and click on it with the tool, we can see the selector is list container, and it already has a position code, position relative. This is different from position fixed. With position relative, it won't be fixed to the screen, but it can be moved from its original position with top, left, right, and bottom codes. We're going to move it with left codes this time, 350 pixels from where it was before. I'm also going to change the width with this width code. Width and height are important codes, obviously, for the width and height of a section on your list, and you decide how tall or wide they are with the pixel amounts. For example, I'm making this table 700 pixels wide. As you can see, it doesn't decrease the width of the entire table. That's because there are other sections with their own width codes we have to find and lower to 700 pixels as well. I'll adjust the left some more and then copy and paste these changes to my CSS Edit Box first. Now I want to change the width of the blue bar up here. I highlight and click on the bar as usual, but when I try to change the width, it doesn't give the results that we want. That's because this isn't the exact right selector here. This happens sometimes. It controls the text but not the bar itself. So when this happens, you can search some more, or you can click up and down on the HTML on the left. That should show you some other code selectors that control what you're trying to customize. It seems intimidating to use the HTML, but it's not too hard since you just click one or two lines up or down on the left, and it shows you more codes you can experiment with until you find the correct selector codes. And as you can see, the width code worked here and the blue bar fits now. I copy and paste these codes that we found to my CSS Edit box. Now I'm going to use position fixed in top and right codes on all of the buttons on the left side of the page. We'll move them under the category menu, which is on the upper right side. This is so it'll look more like the blueprint. And as always, when I make the changes to each button, I copy and paste the code to the CSS Edit box. We'll fast forward here since you've already seen two examples of this. Now I've shown you how to move stuff. Pause the video and use the Inspect Element tool to move any of the tables, buttons, and links where you want them. Remember to use the Inspect Element tool on them and add position fixed or position relative, then move them with top, left, right, or bottom codes, and a pixel amount. If position relative isn't working for you, you can also try position absolute. Also change the width and height of any section of your list if you want. So we have this line on the side left over. Normally you remove a section you don't want with display none, and we'll go over that code later. But if you notice, this also removes the buttons we just moved. So we need an alternative way to remove this line. I could move it off screen or try to set the background to transparent, but in this case you can see there's a border code in the CSS, and I'm going to set the border to 0, and that removes the line because it was a leftover border. And as always, I copy and paste the changes to my CSS Edit box. Since we've put a lot of work so far into the layout, we'll save it with the blue button under the CSS Edit box. Now let's change the table colors, which is essential to nearly every layout, and we'll add some borders. I can change the table color for this category menu with background color, and then just use a background color like red or blue. But it's best to use RGBA colors for background color instead of something like red or blue. The way these work is there's 4 numbers in the parentheses after RGBA. The first number is for the amount of red, second for blue, third for green, and the last is for the opacity, which is how transparent something is. The numbers for colors can be between 0 and 255, and the numbers for opacity can be between 0 and 1, so you'll probably be using a decimal like 0.8. Here's some examples of RGBA color codes and the color they make so you get an idea of how it works. And I'll also link an RGBA color generator under the video in the description so you can make RGBA color codes easily. It's very simple once you get the hang of it. Border is simple too. Just add the code border and then the color you want, and then the pixel amount, which should be 1 to 10 pixels, and then add solid at the end as I do here. The pixels indicates how wide the border is. Border radius is another code to know, which is going to round your corners based on how high the px amount is, the pixel amount. So now I'm going to add background color to this other table. But as you can see, it has some white sections in front of it. So we have to find the codes for these sections and make them transparent so that we can see the table color behind it. But first, as always, I copy and paste the CSS changes to my CSS Edit box. I have to search the HTML a bit to find selectors for these white sections so I can make them a transparent background color. I also want to search the CSS and remove the border codes and delete them or change them to 0, and then add those codes to the CSS Edit box. And finally, I add the border and border radius to the list table. Pause the video and color your table and links with the RGBA background colors like I did. Choose colors you like and use the RGBA generator linked under the video if you need help finding a specific RGBA color code. I want to remove this logo, so I click on the tool, highlight the logo and click on it, and then the code for it comes up for it, which is header title. I can remove it with opacity 0, visibility hidden, or display none, which I'll use in this case. And of course, I copy these codes to my CSS so it will take effect on my layout after I save. Now I notice there's text I did encode behind our category links table. This kind of thing happens sometimes, and to get this code I need to temporarily move the category table down. So I use my tool on it to highlight it and click on it and access the category links table's codes, and I use top to move it down temporarily. We're not going to copy and paste this top code to our CSS Edit Box though, because we don't want that changed permanently on our final layout. We just want to move it down temporarily so that we can access that text behind it with our Inspect Element tool. So now I can access the Viewing Your Anime List text with Inspect Element. I can use this section to add an image as in our blueprint, which you can see here. So this is how you add a background image to a section of your list besides body, which most people are familiar with. First, I highlight and click on it with the tool, and you see its code here. To keep track of it, I'm going to temporarily make its background color red. This is a good trick for keeping track of elements on your screen when you're customizing them and moving around and resizing them. I want to fix this element to the bottom right of my screen with position fix and also the codes right and bottom set to 0 pixels. Now I give a new height and width so it can fit the background image like in our blueprint. And now I add the background image code with URL in parentheses, then upload the background image, which is the render of this girl. I add .png to the end since you always want .png or .jpg for all of your background URLs. Some useful codes to add would be background attachment fix to keep it in place and background size contain to fit it to that screen. We'll also add background repeat no repeat to stop it from repeating. And finally, we add background position codes to position the image at the bottom and right of the element, which is all red right now. And since it's set, I can make the background color transparent since we don't need that red color anymore. I'm going to see how it looks full screen by undocking the Inspect Element tool, and as we can see it's not fitting right. We need to add some more height to it. I can also help fix this issue by making the background image take up a percentage of the element instead, by making the background size a percentage instead of contain. You have a lot of options like these when adding a background image to different elements. You can experiment and try them all out to see what fits best for your layout. Use any of the examples that I've shown you here. So I copy and paste these codes to my CSS Edit Box and we save and reset our list page. As a side note, when you're changing the background images for the buttons on the left side menu, remember there are many codes for this section, so you need to select the correct icon menu codes, like here. And also, you might want to set your background sizes to contain since they're in a small space. And finally, in order to remove the icons overlaying the button, use display none codes on the SVG icon selectors like here. Pause the video and remove anything you don't want with the Display None code, and add images to any part of your layout as I did by uploading them to Imgur and using your Inspect Element tool. You can use the tool to add images anywhere on your layout to any section. Here's how to change the fonts. You choose a selector like List Container here, which controls the list table, and you add the code color. I'll make it cyan. And as you can see here, it changes some of the colors, but not all. We can also add exclamation point important after colors to try to make it control more color. But this doesn't work here because the links have a different code controlling the color for the links, which we need to find and change. You can inspect the link itself with the tool to try to change the color for that link, and this works sometimes. You can also copy and paste the selector and then add A afterwards, and that will be the selector for the links. So in this case, we're going to use list container A to control the colors for the links in the list container. To change font styles, you need to visit the site Google Fonts. Search for and choose a font from their site, and then click on the import code here. This goes at the top of your CSS Edit box. I know we've added codes to the bottom so far, but imports always go at the top instead. Now, any selector you add font family and the font name to will inherit that Google font. For example, we'll add our new font to the list container A selector we just made, and watch it change the link's font when I save. So we'll make a new selector for the links in the category menu table too. This is the category menu selector, and I add A at the end to control the links, and now I add my code. It doesn't seem to work though, so I can use the important trick from earlier to force that font onto those links. So let's change the text at the top of our list that says all anime. We'll use the inspector tool and our new font. As normal, we copy and paste the codes to our CSS Edit Box and paste them to the bottom. But this time, I'm only going to keep the codes we actually changed, which is the font family. This way, our CSS will be cleaner from now on, and as you get better at making original layouts, try to only use the CSS codes which you actually change, and delete the rest as I just did now. This might be difficult for beginners, so you don't have to do this, but it does help in the future to have more organized and clean CSS. And now our fonts are changed, and our layout looks a lot like the blueprint from earlier. We have only a few more changes to make, and then we'll go over some extra tips. First of all, you need to know how to change font sizes, which is really important for any layout. Just choose a selector with the font you want to change and add font size and a pixel amount. Now you know how to change your fonts, so pause the video and adjust your fonts how you want with what I've shown you. There's a lot of font types you can choose from on Google Fonts, and I'll link you to that underneath this video. Box Shadow is going to add a glow around an element so it looks similar to our blueprint. There's 4 pixel amounts in all that control how the shadow looks. I'll link to a box shadow CSS generator under the video, so you can easily create your own box shadow codes rather than just copying mine or making guesses. More on these generators later in the video. You can also customize 2 selectors with the same codes with this trick. Just separate the selectors with a comma and add the codes in the brackets after them. I'm using this trick to give both sections the same box shadowing. Finally, margin top, margin right, margin left, and margin bottom are alternatives to the codes top, right, left, and bottom, which we used earlier to reposition our tables. Use them when you can't use the other positioning codes for some reason. So our layout is complete and looking a lot like our blueprint. Now we'll go over some extra tips and ways you can get help with your original layout. Pause the video and make any extra adjustments to your layout. By now, you should know how to do a lot of important customizations, and you'll be able to do even more with the following tips I'll give you. Also remember, if a property code doesn't seem to be taking effect, you can add important to the end, like I do here, to try to force the code through. This can work for any property code, not just font and color codes. Here's some other ways you can customize a background image. You can use percentages for the height and width of the element in order to better fit that image to more screens. Padding is a code you could use on sections with text inside of them in order to move the text around. We can also remove the text by simply changing the color to transparent, as I do here. Hover is a very potent trick to change the properties of a section when you point your cursor to it. I need to make a new selector based on a previous one first, and then add hover to the end of the selector, and I'll add a background image that will show up when we point our cursor to that section. Z-index determines what element is in front of the others. The higher the Z-index, the more likely it will be in front of other objects. When you set an element to 0 Z-index or less, it should go behind the list table. When you are fixing elements to the screen with position fixed, you can center them on all screens with this combination of codes, and then you can move them off center a little bit with top and left codes if you need to. You can also use our club tutorials to find codes that do things like add big preview pics, effects on hover, and animated intros. In the Inspect Element tool, you can go to the Style Editor tab to access your raw CSS file and edit it there as well. The changes will show up on screen, but make sure you copy and paste your changes to your CSS Edit Box as always. If you're looking for specific selectors, like say the selector for the currently watching category link, you can install a mapped layout, which I've linked under the video, and with that the Inspect Element tool is more likely to pick out specific selectors for links and other sections like here. So you'll be able to customize specific parts of your layout more easily, like I did here. There's more ways to get selectors, but these are the easiest ways, and this should give you access to most of what you should want. But you can see my advanced CSS tutorial videos for more ways to get more codes, including making new selectors. I also go over some other codes, and those videos are linked under this video in the description. Here's a final tip for Inspect Element. Use the targeting icon next to the selector name in order to see all the sections that that particular selector customizes. I've linked some useful sites in the video description as well under the video. CSS-matic will let you generate some codes for your selectors so you can preview them. RGBA Color Picker lets you generate and preview the perfect RGBA color code for your background colors. And W3 School CSS References has all the CSS property codes, and you can preview them with working examples and then copy those codes. If you want to be a professional designer and learn more about coding CSS, then you can also check out that page and also their selector reference page to gain in-depth advanced knowledge about selectors, and this is for people who want to go into web design as a career. Now, when you're starting an original layout, you can also install a grid style layout at the beginning so that you can make an original layout based on the grid theme. This is a lot easier than trying to recreate a grid style on your own, which is very difficult. You can also install another user's layout and learn tricks from there with the Inspect Element tool. Also, when starting a layout, keep in mind you don't have to make it exactly like I did. You can make one based on your own ideas and imagination, and you can use a banner with the header section as I do here. This is popular with a lot of layouts. Underneath, I have linked many resources, including where you can ask for help in our club, where you can share your layout design in our club, more videos on advanced CSS design like making your own selectors and finding more codes, and I've also linked tips from list designers, including contest winners, and I also link where we will host contests so you can enter your layout later on if you want to compete. So good luck on your layout designs, and be sure to share them with us and ask for help if needed. I recommend asking for help in our club and linking the CSS code which you're working on.